Hello, I'm Tara with Earth Tantra. In this video, I am going to share my very personal story of my spiritual awakening experience. And this is a very heartfelt story that comes from deep within. Before I continue to share my story, I invite you to subscribe to my channel now. So sharing my story and my pathway to Tantra is actually a pretty long one. Just to give you a little bit of background about me as a child and a teenager and a young adult. I lived this very fluid ADHD life. I moved around a lot and I went to 2 different colleges. I changed my major 3 times and I really was in my feminine flowy self. And later in my 20s, I met an amazing man and this really great, beautiful relationship started to blossom. And over time in our relationship, we ended up getting married. My careers began to take a bit of a different path. So I went from working outside and working seasonally and creating my own pathways to finding myself working inside and working in front of a laptop. A lot of data entry and managing youth programs. And I really did like those jobs because they had a very special place in my heart for serving community, which is really, really important to me. And the other thing that started to evolve besides myself and picking different forms of careers, married, and our relationship ended up being an unhealthy relationship. There was some codependency. And I didn't really know what was happening or what was unfolding at the time. I didn't even know what codependency was. I felt like I had to hold the emotional support within my family unit. And we also have an amazing daughter together. She's absolutely awesome. And I found myself becoming more and more in the masculine role, more focused, more directed, because I felt like everything else in our relationship and in our family unit was chaotic. And so as I was adopting these characteristics, knowing that they weren't right or wrong, it's just how it was. And so I want you to understand that there's no blame. That's how I reacted and how things evolved. And so I found myself becoming a little harder. I found myself losing that sense of softness, losing that sense of fluidity. And I was trying to find it and bring it back into my life, but I didn't know how. And I started to run again very intensely in half marathons, and I was in absolutely great, awesome shape. Running really long distances, at least for me, it's a really long distance. Finding that space to let go and to move my body, and I didn't know how. So up until this point, I had no spiritual connections, except perhaps I did grow up in the Greek Orthodox Church as a youth, and so ceremony and ritual was really a part of my life at a young age, and I was always drawn to that piece of importance and sacred ceremony. But I didn't really have a practice. Coming back to the time of my life when I was seeking to reconnect with my femininity, seeking something else. I didn't know what I was seeking, but I knew that something needed to change in my life because I was becoming unhappy. In this transition, I was also becoming free, but I felt like I was trapped and stifled and being held back from my true self. And I didn't feel like I had that support to spread my wings and to explore and to just release and let go. As this began to unfold and as I was tuning into these different pieces, I began to write a blog, restlessgenes.com, and dealing with adult ADHD. Because also in my head I thought, well, it's because I have ADHD and I need change and I need challenge, which is true, which is very, very true. But then there's this other piece that I was losing within. And so very unintentionally, but calling out to the universe, I was asking for change. I was asking for something else. I was asking for my purpose, again, unintentionally. I didn't say these words in a ceremony or ritual or set new moon intentions around this. I just knew it in my head, and I really, really felt it. Like, I felt it so strongly in my heart. And so I was contacted by a casting company, Metal Flowers Casting, and I got this call and they said, hey, we think you would be really good for this television show called Naked and Afraid. And I was like, what's that? Because I hadn't heard of it before. And they said, okay, check it out and get back to us. So that's what I did. I turned on the TV, I found out when it was airing, and I watched an episode and I Googled it, and I thought, you know what? Like, this would be an awesome way to test my survival skills, because I have a wilderness survival and wilderness therapy background. And I thought this would be like so amazing to do. It's a 3-week challenge from the Discovery Channel, and the concept is 1 man, 1 woman, no clothes, no food, no water for 21 days. And they put you in an extreme environment, and then the camera crews follow you along, and poof, here comes the story that's developed, and then it airs. And they take, like, I don't know, it's like hundreds and hundreds, or maybe it's like 2,000 hours or something, and they condense it to 46 minutes. And all of those hours that they condense from are from multiple cameras, and a diary camera, and the camera before the show and after the show, and follow-ups and everything. And so they picked this storyline, and along being presented with this opportunity, my husband was on board, and I was so excited because I was going to be gone for 3 weeks, which had never happened before. And I felt like that this was a gift, that he said yes, and that I had this opportunity. And so I jumped on it and I prepared, and I went in like, I'm gonna be this like fucking amazing survivalist. And I went in with this like this masculine energy to like prove and to thrive. And something else happened, something that was completely different. While I was out there, my energy shifted, and almost immediately it softened. And nature, being in nature, is really comforting to me, and it's a place where I find solitude and nurturing and comfort. I'm not fearful of the outdoors, of the backcountry, a jungle, wherever. I love it. And because I was naked and my body was upon her, skin to skin, on Mother Earth for 21 days, and she vibrates at a very low frequency of 7.3 to like 8 point something, my neural system started to shift, and I could feel my body recentering. I didn't exactly know what was happening at the time, and I didn't have words to describe it, but I knew that something was shifting inside. And even out of like the over 600 nights that I had spent underneath the stars, camping, hiking the Colorado Trail, backpacking trips, being an outdoor guide, wilderness therapy, my own vision quests, etc., nothing was like this. This was completely different, so different on a whole nother level. And as my energy was shifting, other things were aligning. I had to really come into this deep acceptance within, because my partner, he is awesome. He was awesome. His name is Dustin Hobbs, and his idea of survival was different from mine. He went in prepared, and he ate a bunch of food to gain some weight, because we know in a survival situation that you can survive 3 weeks, the rules of 3 weeks without any food, until your body finally starts to devour itself, devour its organs, and start eating away at itself. And me, I went in there really thin because I was also running at the time, and I knew that I had to eat. And so once we had food, water, and shelter, which was at the very beginning of our challenge, we kind of shifted and changed after we met those goals. His tactic was to sleep a lot and just let his body eat away at itself and use its fat deposits, which is not wrong. And me, I wanted to thrive a little more, and I knew that I needed food, because I went in pretty thin already. And I really wanted to survive. I wanted to find food. I wanted to try every day. And I had to realize that just because our survival tactics were different doesn't mean that they were wrong. And I had to really accept that. I had to accept that his way was not wrong, my way was not right. They just were what they were. And so once I really began to look within and understood that there's no right or wrong way, things began to shift for me even more. I really felt like, especially one night, I was sleeping and I really felt like I could feel Mother Earth's pulse, feel her heartbeat underneath me, holding me in place. And it was the most strongest, most beautiful connection I had ever felt. Because in this time, there is many hours throughout this challenge to just be. And because I was so task oriented in the past and I always had a goal, hiking with kids or making it to that peak, or I have to get in so many miles a day, I was so extremely goal driven that I never really allowed myself, except for maybe a couple of hours at a time, to just be with Mother Earth, but not for multiple days. Even when I went on my vision quests, my personally developed vision quests, I would have tasks that I would do. And so maybe just brief periods of a couple or 3 hours where I would just be and explore, but never day upon day upon day upon day. And this was so different, so completely different, resetting my mind, body, and soul. And I also say my body because during this challenge, you are only eating the foods that you can find in nature. And I went into this challenge detoxing from sugar completely, caffeine, and any preservatives or things like that. And if you've seen my episode called The Swarm, I had this energy like all the time, and I don't know where it came from, because by the end I was under 100 pounds and my body completely detoxed. And so on a cellular level, on a mindful level, on a spiritual level, with the deep grounding, my body was preparing itself for something that I never, ever would have imagined would have happened to me before. And so after I came home, about 2 weeks, it took my body some time to regain a little bit of strength and for me to get out of this bubble head, because really my body went through severe malnutrition. And so once I was able to get those nutrients back into my body a little bit, this amazing thing happened. And it's something that I thought only existed in movies or in books, something that would never happen to me. And I would not have believed it if somebody said, you are going to have this amazing experience. And so I had a spiritual awakening. And I wasn't sure when it began what was happening. I had no idea. And I was so blissful. I was crying every day, not because I was sad or upset. I was crying because I was so fucking happy. I can't even describe it into words, but it's like I finally knew and understood my place in the universe. Even though I didn't know what my purpose was at the time, I felt this deep connection. And it wasn't in my head, it was in here. And it was so profoundly beautiful. And I remember calling my dear friend Jamie, a yoga teacher in Fairplay, Colorado. Like, something is happening and I don't know what's going on with me. I might be a little crazy. And she's like, it sounds like you're having a spiritual awakening. And so she put these words to my experience. And what do? In today's age, you Google it and you're like, oh my God, this is what's happening. And even before I knew I was having a spiritual awakening, I was drawn to meditation, which I had never, ever done before. I didn't meditate and I felt like I have ADHD. There's no way I can like sit and just be. But I was drawn to meditating actually for about an hour or two every day. And at first I felt shame around it, and I would actually hide it from my husband, and I would hide it from my daughter. And I just felt like I didn't know what was going on. I couldn't describe it. And I started to dive into some other practices of chakra alignments, crystals, tones, lining crystals along my body with tones, and doing some breath work, which I had no idea what I was doing either. And I had some pretty profound traveling experiences, visions, sounds that came into my head. So important. And this awakening lasted about 2 weeks. And at the tail end of this awakening, I had this really intense dream about person on the production crew of Naked and Afraid. And I remember emailing them and saying, hey, I had this dream, this is what it was. It was so strong, and I just had to tell you about it. And his version of the story was, he read my email and was like, what are you talking about? Like, this is something that I'm dealing with. You are scaring me. You are freaking me out. And so he didn't respond for a really long time, because it was a dream that was really aligning with him. And I've had some other like connections like that early on in my adulthood, but nothing that aligned. And so one of the hard pieces that can be hard in a spiritual awakening is knowing that you have to release things in your life that no longer serve you, things that don't align, things that are hurting you, things that are unhealthy. And I kind of knew this for a little while, even before my spiritual awakening, but it was the spiritual awakening that gave me the confidence to end my marriage. And that was hard. It was really hard, because I knew I was going to be hurting my husband, who I really cared for a lot, and most importantly, in my daughter. And that was hard. It was hard. But at the same time, I knew it was something that I had to do. And it felt right. I had peace with it, and it felt right within my body. It felt aligned. And so after doing that, I actually created more space for me to follow my truth, to live in my truth, to be more happy, and to be able to find my trails along my path. And during this time, I was confiding with a friend on releasing my marriage, and they suggested looking into Tantra, thinking that Tantra might save my marriage. And I knew it wasn't going to save my marriage, but I knew it was really going to help me. And so I went to my first tantric weekend retreat with Dawn Cartwright. I knew that that weekend came to me and everything aligned perfectly while she was in Colorado offering this retreat. And so I went, and instantly I knew, like, this is what I'm called to do, without even really knowing much about Tantra. This was going to be my pathway, that this was going to be something that I was going to share with the world. And it just felt right within every freaking cell in my body. And so I began to learn more about Tantra, the practice. I began to seek out different teachers within my community, within Colorado. I moved to Boulder for a short time, and I just really began to like pull all of these different practices and like with what resonated with me. One of the things I was having a really hard time with was finding a Tantra teacher who wove in earth-based tantric practices. So bringing in the element of Mother Earth, her elements, and really weaving that into the healing practices within Tantra. And I was looking, I don't even know, it was for like 6 months for somebody that really had a foundation for this, because my background is wilderness therapy, being in the outdoors, immersing into Mother Nature, witnessing teens going through the program, adults, those aha moments, and Mother Earth herself really, really heals. And so I've ended up coming across this amazing, beautiful soul, Eugene Hudland, with Tribal Tantra. He was in Boulder at one point teaching a course, and I was able to make it to one of his workshops while he was there. And then he mentioned, I'm going to be offering a teacher certification, and I had some questions for him, and I really liked when he talked with the group about weaving in some earth-based practices. And I sat in it for a while, and I really felt like this was going to be my teacher certification, teacher for stage 1, being prepared to share Tantra with others. And so that aligned really beautifully. And so I ended up studying with Eugene in Thailand for a month, and it was a really beautiful, lovely experience, and probably the most perfect alignment and perfect setting for me personally in moving me forward in being able to share Tantra with other people. And during my spiritual awakening, I began to move into the space of owning my truth, owning what really I felt inside. And I really trusted that. I very, very rarely during and even after have too many heady questions about what's coming up for me, and I just go with that instinct. I learned to trust my intuition on a whole other higher level versus weighing out this, weighing out that, or making like a pros and cons list. I learned just to feel, because I feel so much inside, and just really, really trusting that we all have that gift within. But this was on a completely different level, and it almost seemed like everything that was presented to me was lining up with my purpose, with my truth, what I felt was right. And during my spiritual awakening, I found it hard when I would tell people about it who hadn't experienced something similar or even really knew what it was. It was actually kind of discounted, or, oh, that's nice, or, you know, you're kind of crazy. But my friend Jamie was really there for me in so many ways, and she really held this amazing, beautiful space of just like asking me questions and giving me support in this really awesome way that helped me, and it helped me ease into what was happening at the beginning for that like couple days where I wasn't sure what was going on, and then hearing her voice and her support around that just cleared the pathway for complete acceptance and just receiving everything that was presented to me. It was such an important piece. And so one of the things that I really want to convey, if you have a spiritual awakening, if you have a friend who does, or know somebody who is, or whether your spiritual awakening was in the past, or maybe you'll be really lucky and you'll have more than one. I hope I do someday, we'll see. One of the practices that's so important, time and time again, and I hear this across the board from everybody, even from Grandmaster Mantak Chia of the Tao, to just people having conversations with, is during your spiritual awakening, it's so important to maintain that grounded, centered peace, being in contact with Mother Earth, or practicing grounding meditation. You kind of put it in the form of chakras, staying in the lower 2 chakras, especially the root chakra. It's so important, because if we are up here, because when you are having a spiritual awakening, your chakras are open. You are completely open to receiving the messages from the universe. And it actually sounds kind of funny for me to say that just a little bit, because I just thought, like, back in my, I'll say, older life, like if somebody would have said that, I would have been like, you are nuts, like receiving from the universe. But it's really true. It's really fucking true. And I can't even like describe and put it into words even more, but it's true. And so your energy is completely open. And if we are like up here, that can be really dangerous if we don't know how to come back down, because we stay, that energy starts to turn into like this headiness and this space of being out there and not being back within, not being grounded. And so sometimes spiritual awakenings, they just like, they hit us on the head. We may not even know that it's gonna happen. I didn't know mine was gonna happen. Or if we're seeking them purposefully and it's presented to us, just know that once that happens to you, once it's happening to you, we really need to come down and we need to stay grounded so we can process and accept everything, versus like being out here, being out in the universe and not knowing what to do. Can be really dangerous to our spirit, and not knowing where to direct that energy. So bringing it back down, bringing it within, really feeling it and understanding, maybe not even understanding or processing it, but trusting it. So important during a spiritual awakening. And so sometimes when we hear stories like mine or somebody else's, we want it. Like, we want to experience that. And I had no idea that mine was coming. I wasn't seeking it. It came to me and it was presented to me because I was ready to receive at that time. And so if we want this experience and we're trying so hard to like grasp it and go through all these different practices and just trying like too hard, it's not going to come to us. We need to let that go, release that. When and if it's your time to receive, you will receive it. And I almost think if we are trying too hard and we're too much in our brain, our body isn't open and aligned to receive. And so if you're watching this video right now and you're like, I want that, or no, I don't, no, thank you. Keep in mind that we need to be soft about that, and we need to really take care of ourselves and align ourselves to receive. Some people go lifetimes and they never receive a spiritual awakening. And I also want to mention that my experience was completely blissful. There was the hard piece of dissolving the family unit that I had, and that piece was hard. Everybody has a blissful 2-week experience where they're crying every day because they know their place in the universe. I've heard other stories where then the onions start to peel off, and mine have peeled off too, but in different ways. And sometimes that really shitty stuff starts to come a little bit at a time versus like a 2-week Shazam Powerball moment. And some people just might be for a day or a little like micro doses of a spiritual awakening. And sometimes we're faced with some really hard decisions that we don't want to make a decision on, or that we don't want to go there, even though we know that our heart knows that it needs to go in that direction. And so I just want you to know that all spiritual awakenings aren't blissful. All spiritual awakenings aren't within 2 days. Sometimes they're shorter, sometimes they're longer, sometimes they're microdoses, sometimes they're really fucking shitty. And we're faced with this like awfulness in front of us. But in closing this video, I was really excited to share my story with you. It's been shared in other places before, podcasts and written format, and in person a lot in person, but this is the first time that I've actually shared it on video for YouTube, on my YouTube channel, and it just feels really good to share that with you. And today I'm also wearing an Amazonite stone around my neck, which is associated for throat chakra opening stone. And yeah, I just wanted to point that out because it felt really good too. Okay, yeah, if you have any questions, please comment in the section below, or you can PM me, DM me, and all my contact information is on my website, earthtantra.com. Thank you so much.